the Holocaust. I used to swear to myself if something like that were to happen, I would stand up and raise my voice and do something against it. And I heard so many around me to do the same. But where are they? I'm speaking here today as someone who was fired from the German government as a civil servant last week, serving as a senior legal advisor in a federal ministry. Dismissed for exercising my fundamental rights to freedom of speech and political participation in criticizing Israel's genocide in Gaza and for denouncing the complicity of European governments in these crimes. While I was running for a political office for the German federal parliament elections with Mayor 25, the Grassroots party of DM25. As I said, kind of involuntarily, but I did so because so this happened in Germany, not in some authoritarian regime, not under autocratic rule, but here, right here, in the European Union. I did not break any law or incite violence. I exercised my right to freedom of expression and also my freedom to political activity and demanded justice and peace and accountability to the state of Israel, committing war crime after war crime after war crime. A right supposedly protected under the European Convention on Human Rights, the German Constitution, and the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights. The German Federal Commissioner, however, Felix Klein, can publicly advocate for Trump's plan of ethnic cleansing, as he did 3 days ago. And when asked, the German government's response in this remains neutral, stating that this was his private opinion. The main reason in my dismissal letter is that I apparently violated the principle of moderation when expressing my opinion. Among others, an example was that I posted on X that Israel is a genocidal apartheid state. Now, when the reality has become so abhorrent and radical, opposition dissent must be marked as radical and extreme. Israel is in fact accused of committing genocide in Palestine in front of the International Court of Justice. The same court which also issued an expert opinion on the illegality of Israel's 57-year-long brutal military occupation in Palestine, resuming that there are great violations to human rights and international law and racial segregation or apartheid. And that, by the way, Israel has to get the fuck out of there immediately. Sorry for the language, but now I'm not a civil servant anymore, so I'm kind of enjoying to actually violate my principle of moderation when I express myself that I not have anymore. So. The German chancellor thought just stated recently in an interview that the claim Israel is committing a genocide is absurd, while the International Court is seeing plausible reasons. He calls it absurd. The German government and center parties are actively devaluating the international legal framework, the very framework answering to Germany's historical crimes. At the same time, lecturing other countries about human rights, democracy, and freedom rights. Across the continent and beyond in the Western world, we are witnessing a war on dissent voices, a war on activism, and a war on truth. My case is not an exception, but a systemic phenomena. It had happened to hundreds of people in similar ways in Germany, if not thousands. It is also much a part of a much broader authoritarian shift in Europe. Meanwhile, Europe governments continue to support actual war crimes, selling weapons to Israel, cozying up to far-right leaders, and expanding the surveillance state. This all tells us one thing. The center politics dragged us all into an identity crisis. The center has become right, taking over radical and right-wing rhetoric and policies. Europe experiences a rapid rise to the right while the economy is stagnant. This is the playbook of our authoritarianism. Hard word. A growing discontent among the population paired with a decades-long propaganda campaign against Muslim and Arab people. And how could it not be when liberal, democratic, and conservatives wholeheartedly support the most racist, fascist Israeli government in committing a genocide? Thus, No one connects the dots. When people are being dehumanized in another country and we support it, it will inevitably backlash onto our own societies, and your own societies will become racist and fascist. Dehumanization and vilifying of the others has become the center party's new rhetoric, shamelessly so in Germany, as we saw in the last federal election. Migration is the scapegoat everyone turned to, while experiencing a huge lack of workers due to the undeniable demographic change that is reality, even though no one wants to see it, who the same politicians at the very same time are going abroad and trying to win workers to come to Germany, but at the same time using migration as the #1 security issue and their only campaigning issue. Divide and conquer. It seems the only industry Europe is investing in is the military complex, while bridges and buildings collapse across Europe, and hence neglecting the real needs and wishes of their own people, and thereby driving only more people to the far right, because even the far right demands an end to the endless wars, as Yanis was saying before. It is but a power game of the multinational corporations and the interests of a few elites. Calling for the upholding of the international rule-based order and universal human rights has become a radical act of the extreme left. I've got some news for you. It is not. It is the consensus of our collective existence. It is the bare minimum to agree on throughout all parties. The world has changed, and social democrats and conservatives in Europe have also changed. They are not what they proclaim to stand for. This leaves, however, fertile ground for a movement of global liberation and awakening. It is time now that we reclaim the narrative. Democracy does not mean putting a cross every 4 years in the election cabin. Democracy happens in between, and not only by elected officials, but by all of us. It is misleading to think that our governments serve us justice. If you think about it, they rarely ever did. From European slave trade and colonialization to US-American segregation and South African apartheid, to only name a few atrocities from the past of our Western governments. They were not abolished because the government simply thought one day that it is immoral to do so, but because brave people fought for it. Individuals who organized and put their lives on the line for it. Neither did the governments pretend the Holocaust. Although everyone knew what was going on in gas chambers in Germany, states and thereby their political leaders intervened only when their power was threatened, when all the people had already been murdered. As Europeans, with our many atrocities committed in the past, we have a special moral obligation to become those individuals who stood up against their murderous governments. The mainstream media was also never there to fight oppression, but merely to amplify the voice of the oppressor, as Katie was already mentioning. We can watch this in real time now, every day, in our new apparent surreal reality parody. Look, for instance, how Trump clashed with Zelensky and it dominated the daily news for days. However, Trump's direct genocidal threat to annihilate whole of Gaza is not even reported on by many, or merely a side note. We must challenge these authoritarian turn head-on. My case should not be a warning, it should be a rallying cry. We must defend freedom of expression, especially when it makes governments uncomfortable, and even when it makes ourselves uncomfortable. We must demand an end to Europe's complicity in war crimes. No more weapons to Israel, no more funding for genocide and settler colonialism. We must build a mass movement that fights for true democracy, and one that is not controlled by corporations, war profiteers, and political elites. Something like the M25. We already have it. Anything really that goes against the war machine. Power structures are neither vertical nor horizontal, they are spiral, catching up on everyone along the production cycle. And they start with you. Build your community, connect, start an initiative, start with 2 people, and then grow. And most importantly, we must not be afraid, apathetic and believing as they tell us that we cannot change anything, as Grace was saying. Because that is what they want. They want us to be afraid, silent, and to believe that we are alone. But we are not alone. Every protest, every strike, every act of resistance brings us closer to the Europe we envision. A Europe that stands for justice, for peace, for the people, not for profits and war. They fired me to silence me, but here I am. Speaking out louder than ever. And I will keep speaking. I will keep fighting. And I know all of you will too. Because we will not let them take our voice. We will not let them take our rights. And we will not stop until we have reclaimed our Europe, the Europe for the people. And I want to outline to all of you, I'm just a normal person. I used to work as a civil servant, as I was saying, behind the desk in just a normal office and joined the protests after work. The repressions and the wave of hate and doxing actually made me more well-known, more visible and more influential. While not all of us can stand in the front lines, all of us are equally important to change the course of history right now. Every single person can make an impact, working from the sidelines or backstage, supporting in the way where your talents are. Maybe you're good with media, maybe with language, or maybe good with creating and collecting money. Use it. If we organize, if we show solidarity with each other loud and clear, we are powerful. The ruling class knows that. That's exactly the reason why they're using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. Like me. The system is weak, and that is precisely when it gets violent and reacts in massively exaggerated ways, as it is now. Hope, as Katie was saying, is a choice, right, but I would say it's a necessity, and it is not falling into your lap, as you were saying as well, it's a discipline, it needs to be practiced. Freedom is not handed to you on a silver plate either, it is fought for. There are common global struggles that need to be addressed if we want to keep inhabiting this beautiful earth. The human-made climate catastrophe, a growing number of horrible genocides and wars, an earth and its people that are being massively exploited by multinational corporations and the political elites are our global struggles. Thank you so much for giving me the stage today, and thank you for believing alongside with me in a better future. Let's get to work, fight for what we believe in, peace, justice, and freedom for all people, and a free Palestine.
Thank you, Melanie. Thank you for that. Thank you. Now, we're going to move to the panel discussion. We are running a little bit behind time, so I hope it's all okay with you guys. But we'll talk about Rearm Europe in a minute, because I know that's in the air. But I think we need to just focus on Gaza for a minute. And Katie, if I can start with you and then open it up to all of you. Gaza was a kind of example, I think, of where the left really wasn't able to make a significant impact. There was an enormous gap between public opinion and what the elites were doing. What do you think movements can learn from that? And how do we go forward on this topic?
So it is definitely discouraging that the shift in public opinion hasn't been accompanied by a shift in policy. But I would say that historically, you can't get the shift in policy without the shift in public opinion. So that's always the prerequisite. So while it's not enough, it's necessary but insufficient. So we should focus on, not in a way that where we just sit on our butts and like clap, pat ourselves on our backs, but that in itself is a win. And, I actually was at a conference where Ilan Pappé pointed this out. He said, the Israeli historian who has not lived in Israel for decades now, he pointed out that, Israel-Palestine is just yet another example of the elites being totally out of touch with the people, like Medicare for all. And so I think that, again, it's not enough to raise consciousness, but it is necessary. And there are recent polls that are really encouraging about shifts in the way that Israel and Palestine are seen. I also think that having a more responsible media, which is basically impossible with our corporate media, but I think that we need to create a more robust, independent, and alternative media. But also what we've seen in some cases is that in some cases the alternative independent media was able to force corporate media into sometimes like issuing corrections, retractions, and that's a really powerful thing. But it's just, it's going to take more organizing. Recently, there was an example of something that Donald Trump did where he was going to make some major cut, and there were like 2 days of people protesting and calling their members of Congress, and he did stop that. So I think we also have to remember that we have to try new ways of doing things. We can't give up just because Trump is in office. We were able to get concessions from him. A lot of it was under COVID, so it was kind of emergency circumstances. But we were able to get things like in terms of rent freezes. So I don't really have that satisfying of an answer. But I think that also there have been certain slowing downs of arming Israel, which again is not enough. But we have to just keep pushing forward. And I think that exposing the moral bankruptcy of places like the ADL. I think that also, the ADL, which calls, by the way, while they whitewash Elon Musk's Nazi salute, this same organization, the ADL, calls Jewish Voice for Peace a hate group. So just to give you a sense of these people's priorities.
Thank you, Katie. Anyone else would like to take that, especially with regard to movement organizing in Europe?
Yeah, I think there's a really good example of that, of how that kind of organizing can have a real impact from the UK. Now, in some ways, the last election was a kind of routing for the left because a decisively militant centrist leader who's made it his entire mission to crush the left did win with a big majority. But it was also one of the biggest upsets in kind of British electoral history, in the sense that we have two parties, basically, and a few others that are concentrated in particular geographical areas, because we have a majoritarian system, so whoever wins one constituency takes the whole constituency. It's not proportional, it's very majoritarian, really rigidly favors two political parties, or parties that can build a really significant community or geographical basis, right? Independent candidates just don't win in British politics. Like, it's so hard to launch an independent campaign and build enough support on the local or national, on the local or regional basis to be able to win a seat without the support of a political party. That happened across like 8-9 seats. That's like never happened before. Many of those people were independent candidates who had been put forward by often a Muslim community, but with the support of progressives in their area, to basically say, we are so angry at Keir Starmer over facilitating this genocide. And he did so very, very early on. He justified war crimes live on television. This is a human rights lawyer justifying war crimes live on television. Those candidates won against the Labour Party because they organized effective campaigns, they organized their communities, they brought people together, and they did this really effective form of grassroots organizing. The same thing happened with the Greens, which, by the way, are not like the Greens that you have here. Lots of people who ended up leaving the Labour Party when Jeremy Corbyn was, unceremoniously kicked out, ended up going to the Greens. Jeremy Corbyn won his seat as an independent. A big part of that, again, was over Gaza. Many of these Greens won because of these campaigns that were built over Gaza. And that was a huge shock to the establishment. How are they going to respond? Obviously, by cracking down even harder. But that's what they do. When they get scared, they crack down and they crack down and they crack down until they suddenly have to go the other way, right? So building that pressure, and particularly by doing so, by bringing communities together at the grassroots level, this is something I think that happened somewhat even in Germany recently with some of the left campaigns that were taking place, particularly people like someone like Ferat Kosak in Berlin, who made Palestine a key issue and doubled his vote share. This is one of the most successful local campaigns, even in Germany, right? So building trust, building power at a local level, getting people to knock on doors and actually have conversations to build that kind of trust is, I think, where we have to kick off from.
Thank you. Grace, anyone? Melanie?
Yeah, I would, I think that these leaders don't really ever listen to their constituency, so why would they listen now when there are protests? I mean, they only start to listen when elections are coming up, and then they are going into that direction more or less. And I think it's very telling also in Germany, because in Germany the protests were never that big, like in the UK, like in other countries, for example, because they were taking good care that they are crushed at the very beginning, and that they are framed anti-Semitic, Jewish haters, instrumentalizing the German past, for their power game. And what the political establishment is doing is like full on going on with their plan of geopolitical interests, right? So this is what is happening in Palestine is all because of the interests in the region, because Israel needs to be there for the US, and Europe basically, and Germany anyways, is doing what the US wants. That might change now, but that's the cards, right? And for sure that's true. Like, so what it does, it's not that it still doesn't change anything, even though the protests in Germany have been crushed from the very beginning, but the people are nonetheless fed up. And then new politicians arise, independent politicians, but of course this takes time, and it's not so you won't manage within 1 year to get the ruling class out of the ruling class. You would need considerably longer time, but I think this is a fertile ground that was set now, and you can continue on that.
And the self-censorship must also make it a lot more complicated. I mean, can you foresee at all any cultural shift that might change in Germany, specifically the way that people just won't speak out because they're afraid that what happened to you might happen to them?
I don't know. I mean, this is why I would say it's difficult in Germany, because it seems like there's more to it. It's a post-traumatic, it's a trauma situation, I think, the perpetuator trauma, or like growing up with it, with this guilt. So, and this guilt is being instrumentalized, and then racism. We haven't mentioned racism, to this evening. I think this is the core issue in Germany. The Germany really never denazified. I mean, we have to face that, and yeah, you can go for that. And so this is a circle going round and round, right? Because the government doesn't really care about Muslim lives. The media also not. That's why they're not reporting. That's why they're horrific and horrible and genocide abiders and supporters. And then you have the broad people, and I would say many of them are not even that racist, but they're being fed with this day after day. This is their priorities. This is what they think, what is happening in reality, Yeah. When all these things, like Katie was explaining it so well, of course this trade, and it happens on a daily basis now. And, my case, for example, no single German media was reporting on this. But I have interview questions from all over the world, but not a single one from Germany. But on the other side, when there was the Christmas market and they had hearts where it was saying never again means never again for anyone, the racist tabloid Bild-Zeitung that was responsible for my firing was saying this is an anti-Semitic incident happening on a Christmas market, and the Tagesschau, the main public broadcaster, was picking up the Bild-Zeitung racist, by the way, founded by a Nazi, content and taking it over, right? So this is a thing. This is so hard to break through, because really in Germany now especially, you see how power, politics, and media are just walking hand in hand with each other. to conceal, any dissent that could be happening there.
Okay, thank you, Melanie. Can we segue to Rearm Europe? You had an op-ed in Project Syndicate, Yanis, yesterday, I think it was, in which, let me get the quote. Rearm Europe will do nothing to win the war for Ukraine, you wrote. It will, however, almost certainly drive the EU deeper into its pre-existing economic slump. And you called the whole program smoke and mirrors. Can you elaborate on that argument?
The point I'm making is in sharp contradistinction to the official narrative. The official narrative is that we need to negotiate with Russia through strength. So the idea of rearming Europe is sold to Europeans as a project for strengthening Europe. It will do exactly the opposite. It will weaken Europe. It will fragment Europe. It will, Putin is sitting in the Kremlin laughing his head off at the idiots running the show in Brussels. Because think about it. Think about it along two lines, two different axes. One, let's imagine there is a magic wand that Ursula von der Leyen can wave, and suddenly she has 1 million men and women in arms, soldiers, with guns, with bombs, with missiles, okay? Now, who is going to order them to the battlefield? Ursula. Who has the democratic legitimacy to order a large European army to go to the battlefield to kill and get killed? No one has that. Macron doesn't have that, Merz doesn't have it, Ursula doesn't have it. So even if we could conjure up this army, we couldn't wage war with it because we don't have the European democratic state or even the European dictatorial state. We don't even have a European Putin to order them to march to the battlefield. So the delusion is mind-boggling. Now, let's go to the second dimension. The second dimension starts from the fact that we can't do that, because we can't afford it, because Europe is bankrupt, folks. I don't know whether you've noticed this. The European Union budget is not enough to support the commitments that they've already made. The Green Deal is finished, it's kaput, it's gone, it's forgotten. It was never a thing, really. It was always smoke and mirrors. And now, Ursula, the same Ursula who created the Green Deal as smoke and mirrors, is now proposing another set of smoke and mirrors for the Rearm Europe. She came up with 150 billion over 5 years. That is nothing. That is nothing. And they don't even have the money. And they are going to have to repurpose it from infrastructure and digital technology and green energy to weapons. Okay? That's point number one. Point number, the 500 billion. You know what that is? It's debt that the overextended and over-indebted Belgian state, Greek state, French state, German state will have to take on, right? And of course, that means that the European Central Bank is not going to reduce interest rates. Christine Lagarde said that in response to that. It means that we are going to have to reduce the social welfare budget, because this is how they will find the money, right? Therefore, the social fabric, which is already in a very poor state of disrepair, is going to fragment even more. And it is this lack of social cohesion that is breeding fascism. So essentially, they are going to turbocharge fascism within Europe by creating a deeper, through austerity. So you see, their military Keynesianism is the new austerity for the many and the money spinner for the arms industry and for the very few and some bankers. So what does this sound to you like it is a project for strengthening Europe? And do we really think that piling up a few more shells and some more ammunition on the shelves is going to really make Putin shake in his boots? He's winning with a huge human cost. Thousands of people get killed every day for a few meters or, 200 meters a day, right? And how is this going to be averted by Europe's rearmament? So this is why I wrote this article. And the point is, let's not forget, they are lying to us. They are not going to strengthen Europe. It is what Grace was saying. It's all about control. It's about controlling the budget, reducing expenditure on health, on social security, on the things that we need. No green energy, forget about that. We are doing things that are mind-bogglingly crazy. We are not investing in solar panels, and we are slapping large tariffs on Chinese solar panels that are dirt cheap because the Americans told us, and now the Americans don't want us, but we still charge those tariffs to the Chinese. Europe is a stupid continent, and we need to save Europeans from this European Union. We have to get out of NATO, and then we have to grab those institutions from the hands of people who are not half crazy. They are fully blast crazy.
Thank you, Yanis. And on this topic of rearm Europe, I mean, and also it relates a little bit to what we said earlier about self-censorship. I mean, many people oppose endless war, but they don't want to be labeled as pro-Putin, and therefore they won't say anything. How can movements and activists contend with that? Because I already see this argument being rolled out against many people, and it's very effective. So how can we contend with that? Anybody who wants to?
I think, when we hear this line that people who don't want rearmament and don't want to kind of create a war economy in Europe, that somehow makes them pro-Putin, this is being said by people who are basically financing Russia's own war effort, right? I've already said that there has been this study that the EU has imported more in terms of value, fossil fuels from Russia than it has given in aid to Ukraine. It is helping to shore up the war effort. 50% of Russia's export revenues come from the export of fossil fuels. A huge chunk of that comes from the export of natural gas and to a lesser extent oil to Europe. Other revenues come from the export of natural gas to countries like China, India, etc. How are they able to do that? Because the rest of the world is so utterly dependent on fossil fuels that the price of oil is extremely high. If the price of oil was lower, Russia would not be able to finance this war. And yet, we have elites who are saying, you back Putin. You are literally paying for Putin by refusing to invest in renewables. This is the one thing that would make everyone safer. It would save us from the existential threat of climate breakdown, which, by the way, we think here in Europe we're protected from. What do you think is going to happen when the AMOC, the Gulf Stream, collapses? The UK is on the same latitude as parts of Canada. Our infrastructure is not going to be able to cope when the currents bringing warm air to parts of Northern Europe break down and we get extreme weather events. We get snow, we get very hot summers, very cold winters. Our infrastructure will break down. Sea levels are going to rise. That's going to threaten loads. It's going to cost tons and tons of money to deal with. This is a huge existential threat in terms of lives, in terms of infrastructure, and it's not like a long-term thing. Some scientists are saying that this current could break down by 2050. And then suddenly you start getting all these cascading effects. But they don't want to invest in renewable energy. They don't even want to invest in mitigating the potential impact of climate breakdown. Instead, they want to invest in the arms industry, one of the most polluting industries on the planet, right? Often via extremely corrupt arrangements that allow lots of different people throughout the process to generate kickbacks, that generate lots of revenues for the banks and financial institutions that are also in the pockets of these citizens. And they're not even going to stop buying the fossil fuels that allow Russia to continue this war, at the same time as replicating the Russian war economy model here. How do you think Putin is presenting this offer to his citizens? He's saying, we're investing in the war economy. That means jobs for you. He's paying extremely poor Russians a good amount of money to go and fight in this horrific war. He is doing military Keynesianism on a scale that we have not seen in a very, very long time. And he's doing that by cutting social security, by cutting pensions, by cutting social services, by raising taxes on ordinary people and saying, you are under threat and I am here to protect you. That's exactly what our elites are saying to us. They are saying we're trying to defend you from Russia and accusing us of supporting Russia when they are giving money to Russia and then attempting to replicate that Russian authoritarian Putinist model of you will do what I say because the threat from out there is so significant that if you don't, you will die. That's the offer.
Let me add to that, Mehran, because in 2001, and actually it was with Jeremy Corbyn, we staged protests against Putin, 2001, calling him a war criminal. because he killed 250,000 people in Chechnya in order to solidify his regime. So no one can accuse us of being Putin's lapdogs. He's a war criminal. He's a dictator. He's got comrades of ours, of the M25, in prison because they are left-wing, anti-war campaigners. So is this clear enough? Okay. Now, I hear the argument. You can see that in Germany, in Britain, here in Brussels, in the United States, that Putin is the new Hitler and we shouldn't appease him. Okay, firstly, this is a great compliment for Hitler, because Putin is a war criminal, but he's not Hitler. I personally believe that the Holocaust was unique as a crime against humanity compared to every other war crime, not just war crime. It was a systematic attempt to annihilate a whole people, not simply to push them out of a land, not simply to rob them of what they had. It was an attempt to collect them like stamp collectors who collect every single stamp and then incinerate them. So to say that Putin is the new Hitler is a great compliment for Hitler, okay? But let's say, this is an interesting intellectual conversation. I accept that somebody who wants to argue in favor of this equivalence between Putin and Hitler. If you believe, mate, that Putin is the new Hitler, why are we not sending our own troops to fight him until we drive him into a bunker in Moscow and he commits suicide? Or we drag him to a new Rearmament trial? No, we're not doing that. Because we are deplorable, nasty, cynical hypocrites. What we do is we sit back here in our comfort in Brussels and in London and in Berlin, right? And we send weapons to the exhausted Ukrainians to win the war against the new Hitler on our behalf. So clearly, they don't believe that he's the new Hitler. They are only saying it because it suits their never-ending war narrative, okay? And finally, and that is the answer to your question. What strengthens Putin more? A peace process or sending more money and guns to Ukraine to keep fighting an unwinnable war? Allow me to say that it's the latter. Putin's greatest nightmare is peace, like Netanyahu's greatest nightmare is peace, because his regime is not going to survive the peace very easily. He survives the war brilliantly. His war economy is going gangbusters. It's working brilliantly, not for the people of Russia, but for his regime and for a middle class, which is far better off during this war economy than it was before. So by sending guns to the Ukrainians to kill themselves, to lose more territory every day, we are strengthening Putin. So to anybody who says to me that I am a Putin appeaser, or that I am not taking seriously Putin's threat, what I say to them is you are an idiot who is incredibly useful to the Putin regime.
Yeah, I think that, let me stop it. Very good, yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot to be said. Like, you can say who's the real Putinist, right? Who's really enabling Putin? Who's really helping Putin? Who's really harming Ukrainians, right? If you stand with Ukraine, do you want them to be not just like serving as cannon fodder, but have you seen the videos of them trying to fight conscription and getting like thrown into vans and taken away, and their wives and mothers and daughters crying, and male relatives too? That was a little problematic of me. But I think that also we need to kind of denormalize this smearing. Like, we can't just, someone says Putinist and we like jump into a defensive mode. Like, we need to expose that this is a talking point, ask people when they do that, say, okay, that's fine, that's a nice ad hominem. Can you respond in a substantive way? Can you make the case in a substantive way besides using these talking points that make you sound like an idiot? And I think that, you know, like, this happened if you were against the Iraq War, you were a Saddamist, right? People love pretending that that's how it works. And yeah, the Putin-Hitler thing is just so embarrassing. It's like semi-Holocaust denialism, honestly. And it is, as you said, I mean, it's just so transparent. It's like you can't negotiate because this person is Hitler. And again, if they had negotiated, like, this would have been resolved, thousands of people would be alive, thousands of people would not have had amputations, and, you know, people's lives destroyed, people maimed, people, families separated. And of course, for the people who seem to care more about land than life, they would have had more territory than they ever will now.
Thank
I
you.
would-
Melanie.
I would say to your question also, just use critical thinking. Critical thinking helps. If you don't go to a protest because you might be labeled something that's maybe something that you have to resolve from within. But then also, it's not for everyone, right? Some people just really emotionally cannot handle a protest. There are many, many other ways to engage. It doesn't need to be through a protest. You can give some money, to organizations, to people who are facing repressions. You can write letters. We had an amazing amount of letter initiatives. I mean, all sorts of things. There are so many other things. It doesn't need to be a protest. And then this is a whole round again, right? Like you're getting labeled because the media, because they're racist, because of that. So it's just really hard to hit through the roof. But also you can just start with your family, when there's a discussion coming up or in the workplace. And I know many people that even there they wouldn't be, I don't know if it's the same here, but in Germany, for sure, people would not disagree, even though they fiercely disagree from the inside, because they are afraid to be called an anti-Semite. But this cannot be. This is unfair. I mean, it's more than unfair. It's atrocious. But the Palestinian people did not commit the Holocaust, and they do not have to pay the price for it. And I also I love you, Yanis, and everything you say, but I want to disagree on the statement of that the Holocaust is the worst of all crimes. And yes, as a German, so get tense. Or I get tense when I go back to Berlin. But, I think we shouldn't compare the suffering. Each of those.
I'm not comparing the suffering.
Yeah, I know.
I'm comparing the intent.
Yeah, I know.
The intent to annihilate every single member of a group has never happened before.
Yeah.
It was always instrumental.
Yeah.
So the French destroyed Algeria. They killed hundreds of thousands of Algerians to take their land. The British did the same thing in Australia. The Americans did the same with the natives. But there was never before an attempt to find every single member of an ethnic community around the world. They had their addresses before they came to Greece. They knew their telephone numbers and their home addresses in Thessaloniki, for instance, and they picked them up like stamp collectors needing to complete the stamp collection before they incinerate it. That has never happened in human history, and I hope it never happens again.
No, I know what you mean, but maybe then this is the most German atrocity committed, because it's a very German way to be so bureaucratic and go after people with their...
Industrialized and organized,
Yes, it's very organized. It was
But
very
they didn't,
organized.
hang on, no, I'm sorry, I will have to insist on that. The very same Nazis didn't do the same thing with disabled people and gay people. They only got the German ones. But the Jews, they had to go all the way down to the Terra del Fuego, to Australia, to find every single one of them, to kill them, not because they wanted them out of their vicinity, their neighborhood, but because they wanted to exterminate from the planet, from the cosmos, from the universe.
Yeah, and this is horrible. I mean, the Holocaust is the most...
So I'm not comparing the suffering of people.
No,
I'm comparing the
I know you
intent.
But I
do
think
that,
there's
but-
also an exceptionalism, maybe that, like...
Yes, I'd like to hear from Katie.
No, I mean, do you want, can I just suggest one thing that I think maybe is related to what you guys are talking about? I feel like a couples therapist or something. No, but like...
What?
Oh, okay. Okay, go, yeah.
Melanie.
Sorry, Melanie.
No, it's reparations for me to make... Okay.
I didn't know you'd finish. Go ahead.
Yeah, I understand where this is coming from, but I just think in Germany, now this is used so horrifically to silence everyone who is speaking up for international law. I have to say this, for human rights, for international law. I cannot hear it anymore when people say this is pro-Palestinian, because this indicates that it would be anti-Israeli or anti-Jewish people, which is completely insane. No, this is is a normal decency and human, humane to not want that and children in pieces seeing every day on your screen, and that the Holocaust was horrific, absolutely. And every other genocide was. Genocides are horrific. They are called a crime against humanity because they affect us all. That's why they carry that name, and it's in their very nature to want to annihilate these people and to go after them. And I agree, this was a very German way to do it. Horrific. I mean, who does that? That's so fucked up. Sorry, again, this language. Okay. I should really not. I will finish here, but I am. Yeah.
Katie, can you finish your point? And then I would
Yeah.
really like to
Sure.
turn the floor to everyone
I was just going to say that I think that what definitely happens, though, I mean, you can argue about the uniqueness of the Holocaust, but what is unconscionable and unacceptable, I think, and an actual weaponization of the Holocaust is to use the Holocaust, which Israel does, and a lot of Israel supporters do, to say never again is now. Like Netanyahu says never again is now. No, yeah, he's right, but not about who. Never again is now, in that what Israel is doing is an example of never again. Like, in other words, you can't say, well, because we didn't put this exact number of people in gas chambers, we're cool. It doesn't matter. You can't use the Holocaust as a get out of jail free card. And this is, I think, a big thing, like a split in the Jewish community between people who say never again means never again just for Jews, and never again means never again for anyone, anytime. And it's clear to me that the real moral message takeaway from the Holocaust is not never again for one group of people, it's never again for anyone. And that's why, is Jacques Boud here, by the way? Jacques, are you here? Can you raise your hand? Okay, hi, Jacques. So that's Jacques Boud. He is a professor of social psychology. He also is a Holocaust survivor. His parents were killed in Auschwitz, and he's 94? 92? Okay, sorry, I aged you 2 years, yeah. He's not, yeah. And you should all talk to him if you can, because he's amazing. But what people like Jacques are saying is never again doesn't mean you now identify with what Israel is doing when Israel is committing genocide. And again, it doesn't have to be the same exact genocide. Again, that's not the takeaway from the Holocaust. That is, as long as it's not the same numbers, it's okay. And I know that Jacques has said that when he sees what's happening in Palestine, he identifies with Palestinian children. He identifies with Palestinian orphans because of his story. And that is the never again that I think is actually the righteous never again. And if someone who lived through the Holocaust can see that, how can Germans who committed it not do it? And they need to stop, not you, I mean, yeah, but they need to stop making Palestinians pay for their crimes. And also the fact that they say never again, and it only applies to Jews, shows me that they did not learn any lesson from the Holocaust. It's just ass covering. They learned that, okay, that was fucked up according to the world, right? Like the Western world says that was bad. Of course, they didn't really care at the time. But like the consensus now is that Nazism was bad, so we're gonna like self-flagellate on that. But we're also going to enable and justify and legitimize a genocide that is in many parts created because of our Holocaust against Jews.
Absolutely, yeah.
And thank you to all of you.
If I may add on this
Okay,
very
a
quickly.
last word, and then we must move to the Q&A. Go on.
Okay, I just want to add, so thank you so much, Katie, for outlining that. I think that's very accurate. But I think also, you know, the psychology that is behind this is also very important to understand that Germany, you know, we never really did this remembering and this working up of what had happened. It was on an abstract level and not on an individual level. So, because there's so much shame and guilt around it, you would never ask your friend, and what did your grandfather do, you know, was he an SS official or whatsoever? It was just never talked of. It was complete silenced and denied because there's so much shame around it. And now everyone all of a sudden has a resistance guy in their family, right? Because this is how the Holocaust happened. And so Germany's relationship to Israel is the salvation of the German atrocious history, right? So as long as Germany supports, in the mind of many, I think, supports unconditionally Israel, they can keep their white west of, yes, we have learned from the Holocaust. Not thinking even, you know, that, so the other day they were shining the Brandenburg Gate in a yellow color because of the Bibas family. That was, we don't know what happened, right? But anyways, might be killed by the Israeli army. And where is that for the 17,000 plus dead children, the Palestinian children? You would never see. Why can't you do that? You know, why? For them, could never like really just even say a word to the 60,000 plus Palestinian people living in Berlin and Germany, you know, the descendants that have to go through dead family members almost, you know, every other week. And they cannot even spit out that. And that's a complex.
I think it's fair to say that every genocide is unique. It takes place in its own unique historical context. It has its own history that is extremely important to understand. But genocides also have a few things in common, one of which is that they are built on dehumanization. Dehumanization isn't it's not a sufficient characteristic for a genocide, but it's a necessary characteristic for a genocide. In Rwanda, the Tutsi were called cockroaches. This was blasted through radio stations across the country. Genocides of various different kinds, have been deeply imbricated in the logic of colonialism, which involves a kind of bureaucratic and typologizing logic that is imposed upon other populations. The Germany with the Herero in Namibia is a good example of this. We are in Belgium. Look at what the Belgians did in the Congo, right? These are all, none of these things are the same, and it's useless and puerile to compare them, but they all rest on this fundamental fact of a particular group of people taking control over another population and saying they deserve to die. And we see that logic repeated over and over again in so many different places all around the world today, but so very clearly and particularly when it comes to Gaza.
Thank you, Grace, and to all of you. Okay. It's your turn. So if you've been sitting on burning questions for the last hour and a half, now's the chance to put them to the panel. There will be people walking around with microphones, 2 on the ground floor, 1 on the top. Please raise your hands, and if you need to, please, if you're in the center, then please go to the edge so that the person with the microphone can, let me see if I can make you guys out. Oh, Nadia, the gentleman behind you, there, gentleman in the black.
What are we gonna do?
Hello. So, my name is Gerrit-Jan van 't Veen. I'm from the Netherlands.
Bit closer, please, to the mic.
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah, my name is Gerrit-Jan van 't Veen. I'm from the Netherlands, and thank you very much for the presentation and the panel. And I'm willing to sit here another 2 hours, actually, to discuss the 2 questions that I'm looking at all night. Okay. How did we lose it, and what we must do? And I think it should be questions, actually. Because I really want to know the self-reflection of why it didn't work in the past 10 years, and what are we going to do to change this?
Thank you.
So, can you elaborate on that?
Thank you. Let's have 2 more, and then we'll put them to the panel. It's a bit difficult to see everybody here. Anyone from over here? No? Put your hands way up. On the top row, this gentleman who's... Yep, you. Yep. Is there a microphone for the gentleman on the top at the balcony?
Yeah.
Yep, there is now. Sorry, there's no mic. Yep.
No, we have live streaming. It cannot
Project.
be done. We cannot do
live
this. Madam, there is
We
live
can
stream.
hear, we can
okay.
repeat
No,
it.
but the live stream, they want it for the live
We can repeat it for the live
We
stream.
need a mic.
Okay, we've got a
We need
microphone now. Sorry about that. Go.
My question is also about the future and pragmatics. So, if militarization is not an option for Europe, it's not the best option for Europe, what will be the future of Europe, a strong Europe that is immune to being the individual states to be attacked, just like Ukraine was attacked by Russia, or potentially Moldova, or any other country that is threatened by Russia or any other state. So what will be the practical solution? Is it federalization, or what could we do in order to stay strong, if not militarization? Thank you.
Thank you. And one more. This gentleman here in the black on the left. Yes, you. That's right. We'll do another round, but we'll just put these to the panel.
Thank you very much. In Marxist terms, Yanis, you said that you want, rightly so, a sovereign Ukraine. I guess you mean in international, recognized international borders, but if not, you can let's say, tell us. From what material conditions do you see Putin withdrawing from 20% of the land, including Crimea, including the parts that from their side have been legally absorbed into the federation? And secondly, you said that the economy of war is actually what fuels Putin. So my question is, in whatever peace deal, let's say that it's supposedly this comes from, how do you see that this is not a peace deal, but just, let's say, a truce for the economy of war to continue? Because, as you said, it is actually based on an economy of war. So how do you see those two elements point out? Thank you.
Thank you. Yanis, shall we start from the last question? And also, the second question was also related. If you can answer the last two.
Well, they're all related. I'll start from the first one. Why did we lose it? And what must we do? It's effectively what I spoke about, but I'll give a summary. We lost it for three reasons. Firstly, the complete disunity of the left, the fact that the center-left and the Greens essentially became the allies of the liberal establishment in an attempt to bail out a bankrupt liberalism, which always yields fascism, doesn't move in the progressive direction. Now, why did we, DiEM25, fail? Well, we wasted 3 years, between 2016 and 2019, trying to forge an alliance with the center-left and Green parties. We expended all our energies in that. That was a mistake. They didn't care. In the end, they took some of our ideas, they put them in the dustbin. They only used them as garnish on their dish, but they weren't serious. That's one mistake we made. The second mistake was, as I said, we did not organize, as Grace was saying, at the factory level, with nurses, with the precariat. We were too much of a bourgeois, elitist, university-based intellectual cabal. Okay? It can't be more self-critical than that. And the third reason is that we failed to recognize the immense capacity of the European Union to take some of our ideas in name, but not in substance, and effectively to empty them of content. Like the Green Deal was taken from a Green New Deal, and it gave a really bad name to the Green New Deal. Our idea about a digital monetary commons, a digital payment system that effectively would give us an opportunity to have a universal basic income was presented as a form of central bank digital currency which works for the bankers. So we were not very smart at preventing this use and abuse of our agenda. On the question of, so what will work if military Keynesianism doesn't work? Well, firstly, how about a substantial green investment program for Europe? We have the money. We're simply not putting it in that kind of use. Grace was, again, talked about it quite a bit. So our campaign must be the Keynesianism which works for the many, not the Keynesianism that destroys the chances of Europe and works for the very few. And finally, on the Ukraine solution. Look, it is really very clear. This war cannot be won. It cannot be won militarily. We don't have what it takes as Europeans to fight against a Russian regime which gets stronger as a result of a land war. And also, it is not necessary. You know, on the 22nd of April, you mentioned that, 22nd of April 2022, Zelensky and Putin came to an agreement. It was an agreement that was struck in Turkey. It was about to be signed. It would have been a brilliant agreement, very dissatisfying for the Ukrainians, very dissatisfying for Putin, and that's what would make it a brilliant agreement, because every peace treaty must leave everybody dissatisfied to some extent, because otherwise you don't have a peace treaty. Okay? And it was Boris Johnson and it was the Americans who pressurized immensely Zelensky not to sign the agreement. If that agreement had been signed, we would have spared thousands, tens of thousands of lives, and Ukraine would be in a better situation now. You asked the question, how do we stop Russia from invading us? Well, you know, at some point, we have to take seriously what our opponents say. So, Donald Trump, you know, the problem with the Democrats in the United States and us here in Europe is we have not taken him seriously. When he said, I'm going to impose huge tariffs upon you guys, they didn't believe him. When he said, I want Canada, they didn't believe him. When he said, I want to turn Gaza into a Riviera, they didn't believe him. It's about time we start believing in these monsters. Like Putin, and before him, Yeltsin, Chubais, every single Gorbachev, every single Russian leader had said, don't push NATO into our backyard, into our Russian-speaking territories. Not Russian, but Russian-speaking territories, like Georgia, like the northern part of Moldova, and like eastern Ukraine. Okay? Now, very serious American right-wing commentators, like Kissinger, for instance, were saying it's a stupid idea to put, nuclear weapons of the United States on the border of Russia and to defy him because he's going to attack. Does this mean that we have to surrender the Ukrainians who happen to speak Russian and who don't want to live under Putin's regime to Putin? No, it doesn't. But this is why DiEM25, for 2 years now, was it 2.5 years ago, we have formulated our policy. So our proposal was, for instance, that, as I said before, Ukraine becomes the Austria of Eastern Europe. In other words, it is sovereign, it is connected to the West, it's democratic, it's not under Putin, and it is neutral. It is not part of NATO. That would be a victory for Putin. He would be able to use it within his own regime to say, I want something. They have not expanded beyond Poland into Ukraine. As for the Donbas, which is a genuinely difficult case, it's the northern island of Ukraine, because you've got two communities living side by side. One is Russian-oriented, the other is Ukrainian-oriented. We know that before 2014, there were massacres committed by the fascist Nazi Azov battalion of the Ukrainians against Russian speakers. In Odessa, they burned 32 Russian-speaking trade unions. We know that that is the case. And we know that they have been Russian fascists who have been burning Ukrainian speakers. So what is the solution? The solution we, as DiEM25, proposed was that for the Donbas area, the disputed areas, the difficult areas where you've got Russians and Ukrainians living together since the Soviet Union, we have a Good Friday kind of agreement whereby you have joint de facto sovereignty by Kyiv and by Moscow with European guarantees, like in Northern Ireland, and you have in every municipality, every regional government, you have twin representation of the Ukrainian and Russian speakers. If we wanted to solve this, we could have, and Putin would have been very hard-pressed to say no to that. We should have tried that at least. Yeah. To say that we have to build up an army to stop Russia from... Russia cannot invade anyone. They are killing tens of thousands of people to gain a few kilometers in the Donbas. They are not going to take Poland. They are not going to take Lithuania. They are not going to take Berlin. They are exaggerating this Russian bear threat in order to justify the militarization which is in the interest of them gaining power over you, folks. This is what they are doing. They are blowing up, they are effectively doing Putin's propaganda work for him, presenting him as far more dangerous than he is. Because Russia is a fading country. It is a fading economy. It cannot sustain a war against not even Donbas, let alone Europe. It is Europe which is going absolutely apeshit, totally crazy. But that is functional to the interest of Rheinmetall. If you have shares in Rheinmetall, you love the exaggeration of the Russian threat. If you have shares in British aerospace enterprises, systems, you love it. If you are now we have a new Turkish-Italian conglomerate building drones in Italy. Yeah? They love it. It's fantastic for them. You know, the more deluded we are that Russia is about to take over our homes, you know, the greater their profits and the weaker Europe becomes.
Okay, thank you, Yanis. I do want to ask you guys, have another round of questions from you guys. But before I do, just in relation to that gentleman's question, that, you know, what about the how? What about the, you know, what can we really do? If you guys have got anything else that you wanted to add to what you've already said, I think that we've had a very rich tactical discussion, but if there's something else in response to this gentleman.
Yeah, I would love to respond to that, actually. Because I get asked this question so often, I've now started a newsletter literally called What Can We Do? So I can point people to examples of what they can do every day. And look, the reason I decided to start this was because I think it's really important to emphasize nobody is coming to save you.
They're leaving.
Nobody is coming to save us. Nobody is going to step up and become the heroic leader that ignites the socialist revolution. If change is going to happen, it's going to happen from ordinary people coming together and deciding that things are going to change. Look, I come from a policy background. I spent a very long time working in think tanks in the UK, saying we can develop policies, and if we just explain ourselves really well, people will realize that austerity is actually a bad idea, that it's self-defeating, that it doesn't actually create economic growth or boost jobs or any of those things. And of course, that didn't matter, because they told us that the logic of cutting government spending was about, you know, reducing the size of the state and creating space for the market and, you know, creating long-term economic growth. But it had nothing to do with that. It was about disciplining workers after the biggest financial crisis in a generation, in more than a generation, that had threatened the legitimacy of a capitalist system so badly that they needed to be crushed to prevent that threat from materializing. These are not people who can be reasoned with. They're not people that you can go up to and say, here's a really clever policy agenda that you guys could just implement and it would be in your interests. We've tried that. The only way of doing anything is not to, we can't just be like, oh, can you give us some ideas as to how we could change society if we were in charge? No, we have to start building everywhere right now. How? Okay, the labor movement. Are you in a part of the workforce where you can join an existing union? Yes, great. If so, do so and be active. Start showing up to your branch meetings. I was just chatting to a bunch of my friends who are organizing a program of political education in branches across the labor movement, teaching workers about the history of the labor movement, about Marxism. You could set one of those up in your union branch. Not a member of an industry where there's already a union, well, you can start talking to your co-workers about organizing. There's a great new book out by this guy, Eric Blanc, in the US called We Are Union, about how Starbucks workers just literally started unions. They just started talking to their co-workers and saying, we want to form a union. They went to the big unions and said, can you back us? And they were like, we're not 100% sure because it doesn't seem like a great campaign right now. So they just carried on and they just did it. And that's what Amazon workers have done. That's what workers in the gig economy have done. You can do that. Not in work. Maybe you're retired. Maybe you're a student. Join the student union. Are you a tenant? Join a tenants union. Start fighting back against rogue landlords. There's Acorn, there's renters unions all across the world. Are you in a, maybe you're not a tenant, but you are part of a community, and I'm sure that there are lots of threats to your community in terms of, closures of your community spaces, in terms of threats to your environment. There are community organizers up and down the country who are doing things like starting community energy companies. Literally, there are cooperatively owned wind turbines all across Europe because people came together and decided we want to own our own energy. Like, I could give you an infinite list of projects, and in fact, this is all research for my next book. I'm trying to catalog all these things and speaking to all these people, and they're like, oh, I'm going to put you in touch with this person and this person and this person. Before you know it, I'm on Zoom calls every day talking to people all over the world who are just doing stuff right now. And that is what I think is exciting and inspiring, because they're not waiting to be saved by policies or politicians. They're just saying we're starting right now, building from the ground up, so that when that moment comes, we have this foundation that we lacked. During that electoral political moment, that democratic socialist resurgence of which I was a part, that happened in the 2010s, which happened all over Europe, it was hollow, because it came from the top and there was a mass base, but there was no structural, organized power. There was no way for people to come together and resist that encroachment from people who attacked us. So that's what we need to start building today.
Thank you, Grace. Look, I'm very conscious of time, and I know that we've gone over time a little bit. Can I ask you guys, because a few of you had your hands up, can we have an incredibly quick fire round of questions or comments, very quickly? Just keep them to 15 seconds. something like that. 2 or 3. Go. This gentleman up there with his hand. Yep.
Also, get some women, because
Yeah,
there's
get
a
some
woman up
women.
there.
I'm sorry, I can't tell
There's a
gender.
lady up there. Everyone's pointing at
the
her.
lights are... Okay,
Seems
the
very
lady that
popular.
everybody's pointing at, please. I can't see you, I'm sorry.
Okay, that was
Go.
really
And please be
Thank
concise
you.
because of time. Go.
Yeah, very
Yes, yes,
concise.
Okay. I heard several times speaking about green policies, a very good green policy among things that we could do. I would like to hear a bit more about what do you think about, how do you think a green policy, because I say that because I'm a little bit afraid of green policies because maybe of what happened in the past, and I'm afraid that we fall again in this genocidal mentality where we have dehumanized nature, called it nature, etc., and then we have this approach of looking at green policies in a,
Thank you. The last one from behind you, and the lady behind you.
And go to this lady. That was
There's
cool.
The lady behind you, and then I think we need to cut because
About organizing
No, are we
communities.
hanging
Could I
out?
have
we
some
don't have
comment?
time.
hanging out
I'm
afterwards.
sorry, go on. But we will be in the bar afterwards.
Yes.
Go.
Okay.
Just about organizing communities. Could we have some comments from you about the students in Serbia? What they
Students in
have been,
Serbia.
yeah. What
We
they've
are with
been
them.
doing for.
Okay.
Thank you.
We are with them. That's it.
Yeah.
I like that
We
one.
support the students in Serbia.
Also,
There's a one-word answer.
Also, can I just quickly say, I've been trying to get in touch with some people who've been involved in these protests to do some interviews with them, and I've been really struggling. So if you know anyone who'd be willing to speak to me...
DM25 will do it for you.
Oh,
We are
great.
well
Okay,
connected.
perfect. It's sorted.
we have.
DM me.
Okay, and lastly, that lady's question, please, on green policies. Can we elaborate what we're talking about when we're advocating for specific policies? I think this was her question.
Green policy.
Yes, she was saying, well, you were talking about, I hope I understood your question right. She was talking about green policies and in reference to your speech, and she was concerned
Well,
that...
let me give you a very simple example, right? I mean, I did mention it before, I'll mention it again. When the people of France heard Macron threaten them with a diesel tax to save the environment, immediately they thought, oh, not again. We will pay for it again, not the rich. Whereas if you had a tax, a carbon tax, a high carbon tax, which, however, was revenue neutral, that is, every penny that went into that account was then redistributed according to need to the poorer members of society, to the working classes, and they were overcompensated, they ended up, in the end, with more spending power as a result of the carbon tax. They would all be for it. That is a progressive green policy.
Thank you. Okay. So ends the Q&A. We're going to have a very quick round of closing statements, and then Bart. Melanie. Try and keep it in a minute.
I try to keep it quick. So my answer to that would be, what can we do? Organize, just as Grace was saying, absolutely 100%. And it doesn't matter where, but start somewhere. And DM, I think, is a good place to start. Yanis, I don't understand. I mean, I understand. I think it's very nice that you are self-critical, but it's also not in a vacuum. You know, you're living in times of rising authoritarian fascism systems that have lots of money on their shoulders. So I would say, DM, it's good to shoot for the moon and land in between stars. And I think it's really a starry atmosphere here, that so many people, and some of them from DM, you know, that this is a network, that it exists, and there's something to start and build off and elaborate.
Thank you, Melanie. Sorry to rush you. Grace.
Wait,
I'll
I
keep
just,
it.
sorry,
No, go ahead.
just let me say one thing about the wars and Ukraine and the other wars. I think war is the result of bad politics, and so it's really time to hold politicians accountable, because they're paid for this job and they're doing it bad.
Thank you. Grace.
Very briefly, join a union, join a tenants union, join a protest, join a community organizing network, run for office, get organized.
Katie.
Yeah, something I think that left needs more of is more joy. It's hard to bring it, but I do think that if we make it more joyful, I mean, I think that like something that the right has is that they don't shy away from having fun. They kind of incorporate that, and the left can be a little scoldish, and that's alienating. And it doesn't help anyone to be unnecessarily miserable.
Thank you, Katie. And before I hand it to Yanis, just a couple of very quick housekeeping announcements. Please, there should be a QR code on your flyer if you would like to follow us. Follow us on YouTube. Go to dm25.org/donate if you would like to donate to us. We have no big backers or anything like that. This is the first of multiple events like this. Thank you so much, all of you, for coming. And let's see you in the bar, where we will have conversations that you decided the topics of those conversations, because when you wrote down what is a political issue that outrages you the most, people have been going through all of those in the last 2 hours and putting them into various different topics. So please have a look where they are on the wall, and see you soon at the next event. Yanis.
Well, on behalf of DiEM25, the Democracy in Europe movement, we are 9 years old now, 9 years wiser. We're not a think tank. We are a movement. We depend on people like you, not just to donate, but to join us, to create your own self-organization, to work with us in order to spread the word and to organize in your villages, in your towns, in your cities across Europe, beyond Europe. We don't believe in borders, as you know. Looking at all of you, firstly, it's wonderful to be in the same space together, not through Zoom, not watching YouTube videos, not using cloud capital. It's the kind of, you talked about hope. This is hope. Hope comes from togetherness. Hope comes from being in the same space and then fanning out and spreading the word and bringing more people to our movement. So this is what I'm going to beg you to do. Simply don't fall in love with tonight, because we need to care about tomorrow and the day after through organization out there, and we rely on you on that. But let me finish, and this is how I genuinely finish, with a reminiscence, a memory from that event at the Volksbühne Theater on the 9th of February 2016, when DiEM25 was born. Only yesterday, I was looking at the live stream from then, the YouTube video, and I saw something that I had forgotten about through the passage of time. And it was so prophetic, something that was said by somebody you all know in that event. And if, David, you're ready, I would like to hear this person speaking to us from the Ecuadorian embassy, where he was a prisoner, live at the Volksbühne Theater, to inaugurate as the co-founder of DiEM25, and hear what he said about the task we had ahead of us. And that was what he said live on the 9th of February 2016. Have a look.
The problem for Europe is its lack of integration, its lack of unity, its lack of coherence. There was a dream. There was a dream for what Europe could be, more than the strategic realities, more than the economic realities. And that is a dream that Europe has lost.
And now we all face the same struggles, the struggles against neoliberalism in Europe.
All of you. That collapse in the dream of Europe is something that cannot be permitted. We must fight against it, because otherwise winter is coming, war is coming. We must seize the day and divert Europe from the course that it is on, or else we will have to suffer through a very harsh night.
Well, it's been a prophetic statement by Julian. Yes. The night is here. That long, harsh night is here. And we have this duty to make sure that we do not go gently into this harsh night. Together, we're going to dream again, a new dream, maybe not a dream of a European Union that is civilized, but of a Europe that stops being stupid and starts working not just for Europeans, but for the world over. Carpe diem.
Maybe you guys